and almost everyone that I coach, I'll just say everyone that I coach, if you think about what is the next bold move to make, it's always the right thing to do. So what I would encourage people is to think about that. Like, what does it mean to be bold in my life? And where can I choose to take bold action?
Welcome to the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast. Let's get into the show.
Hey everyone, this is Augustino. Have you ever thought about something challenging in your life and said, well, that's just the way things are? If so, you may be clinging to a story that no longer serves you, and the solution to your problem lies in changing your internal dialogue and story. This is how we can transform our own limiting beliefs. Well, today's guest has a very deep understanding of the positive psychology and also has the Buddhist philosophy to back it up, to really encourage personal and organizational growth. Now, he is an award-winning educator who currently serves as the head of an international baccalaureate world school in Northern California. He's also a sought-after speaker who uses his understanding of positive psychology and Buddhist philosophy to encourage organizational and personal growth. He is the author of the best-selling book, Shift, The Art of Transforming Limitations, where he helps people reduce the addiction to urgency to increase productivity and achieve a flow state that will transform your life. Now, with all that, I'd like to welcome my good friend, Nick Egan, to the show. Nick, thanks for coming on, bud.
My pleasure. Good to be here.
It's going to be great. It's going to be super. Now, very excited about this. Now, if you like what Nick has to say, you can reach him via his website at nickeganphd.com. And if you like our content, please don't forget to leave a comment and rate the show. It helps us out tremendously when you do. Finally, to text the word freedom to 202-410-4202, you get our free ebook, The Bulletproof Guide to Finding a Broker. Okay, Nick, go ahead and tell the listeners a little bit more about your background and your current focus, like what you're working on these days.
Sure. Yeah, my background, I've definitely taken a winding path to get to where I am today. I started off, my family actually is a very successful group of multifamily real estate entrepreneurs. We've talked about this a little bit offline. So I kind of came up in that business world, having that entrepreneurship mindset. And then from there, I decided I wanted to study more deeply the workings of the mind. And so my undergrad was studying psychology. And through that, I became a bit jaded. I decided I didn't want to be a therapist. It didn't appeal to me kind of working on people's overall healing. I was much more interested in helping people flourish. And so I continued the path of what I considered also understanding the mind. So going more deeply into Buddhist philosophy, world religions to some degree, ended up getting my PhD in Buddhist philosophy, spent quite a bit of time studying at a Buddhist monastery in Nepal. And then from there, I led tours all around the Himalayan region, kind of personal development tours with a Buddhist flavor is how I would like to put them. From that, I kind of got into education. And after a while, I ended up circling back around to coaching. I had somebody who was a friend, an acquaintance of a friend, volunteer to coach me. And I thought, I actually brought quite a bit of arrogance to this. And I thought, okay, I'll let her give it a go. But I found it to be a really powerful and impactful experience. And then, so I slowly started dipping my toe in coaching training. And I just discovered that it was really what I was looking for my entire life. It's really just such a powerful vehicle. And I get an absolute charge of working with clients, one-to-one, but also in a group setting too.
But that's interesting how your approach at first was not to be coachable, sort of, right? I mean, I think a lot of people go into that. It's like they kind of like shut everything out and it's like, okay, what do you got to teach me, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people get that way. Do you think that that's a normal state? Like, why does that actually happen? Like, why do people feel that way? Do you know?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that in many ways, like the more knowledgeable we become, we start to have that expert bias in a lot of ways. And good coaching is not like consulting at all, right? So I like to tell people, even if I know quite a bit about the industry that you're in, I don't really use any kind of specific industry knowledge. Really what I'm doing is holding up a mirror to reflect patterns, your patterns of belief that create patterns of behavior that probably have gotten you to where you are today, but are also the limiting factor for moving forward. So really good coaching, it has nothing to do with that specific industry, which is why sometimes I'll have people, a CEO of a marketing company. Oh, what do you know about marketing? Well, I may or may not know some things about marketing, but you don't actually need help with marketing. You need help with mindset. And so that's some of the difference. But I think especially the people that I coach, I don't, there are people that focus on remedial coaching, somebody that's like failing at their job. But the people that I coach are always very successful, very intelligent, motivated, will put in the hard work, but they also can feel that they have a lot of potential, a lot of possibility, and they can raise the bar.
Right, right. But I think part of it is, and we talked, and I think we talked about this in the green room. We also we talked before as well, but it's that story that people tell themselves too that really, I think, it becomes the overarching belief system that they follow, and that thing needs to be really deconstructed, right, and then rebuilt. And I think that's probably the hardest part that many people just can't get their head around, right?
Yeah, the hardest part actually isn't the deconstruction phase is important. The hardest part is even just realizing that your perceptions and your internal narrative is just simply an internal narrative. Because most of the time we walk around imagining that it's fact, right? That it's absolute, even worse than fact, like truth, capital T. Um, and it's true for us. And we can talk about objective truth and all of that stuff. I mean, I'm not saying that everything is subjective all the time, but I am saying that most of what we experience is this internal narrative, what we're calling a story, that creates feelings and behaviors that then will create effects in the world, right? So the first step is realizing that most, if not all, of what we're experiencing and thinking about is not actually like truth, capital T. It's just simply our internal narrative. Then the next step is deconstructing that. And then the next step is actually choosing, do you want to continue that, keep that, or do you want to try to adjust it or shift it in some way? So it's really that 4-part process. Most people that I know that are fairly successful, that first part is the hardest bit,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I
Like
think, but
what other way could I see this exact situation? Something like that.
yeah, I mean, but I think I guess that's the thing though too, right? Before I got into the real estate game, I was working in technology. I was a working stiff at, I shouldn't say working stiff. I was a C-level executive, so I made it to some extent, some success.
Yeah.
But regardless, my think was still very small, and it took me deconstructing my entire life to realize I don't think that's necessary
Mhm.
for most people, right? But that's what it took for me anyway. And hopefully, anyone listening doesn't have to go that far. But I mean, I guess it took like backing and unwinding just about my entire life to realize what I had to deconstruct. But I mean, you actually have a plan, so to speak, and some guidance around that, because I think, just like you said, that first step is the hardest part, to
Mhm.
really breaking down everything and then start building up to really start thinking bigger. That
Mhm.
because that's primarily what holds a lot of people back to seeing great success, right?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of it. We tend to self-sabotage once we start meeting the glass ceiling, our own personal glass ceiling. We self-sabotage for a lot of reasons, and you're right. It doesn't necessarily have to be dismantling your whole life. Hopefully, actually, it won't be that. Actually, but it could be. So there are a lot of reasons that people get to this point of like, oh, maybe I should re-examine the beliefs that I had held so closely for so long. And then perhaps if there's a way, if there's room or space to do so, to be able to shift it. And so playing the big game is definitely a hard step to do. It's scary. It's scary to
Yeah.
really step into your full potential. It's much, much easier to be kind of the quiet, I'm smart and I know I'm smart and I know I'm successful, but I'm not willing to go out and push outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it though too, right? Is that if when you're challenged, it's one of those things that you realize what you can do, and then when you finally overcome something,
Mhm.
it's you're sometimes you're surprised you actually complete it, right?
Yeah, exactly. One of my favorite
Like,
challenges with clients is to have them whatever they're trying to do. Like, let's say they're trying to find a job. I work with VPs sometimes that are looking to try to go to the C level, and I say, oh well, how many people can you talk to in the next week? And they'll say, oh, I'll reach out to 20, and then I double it or triple it. And say, okay, what would it be like to do 40 or 60? How does that change your thinking? How does it change the systems in place that you need to let go of or to create to do that? And how does it change your prioritization? So multiplying a goal is a great way to clarify the system needed to move forward.
right, right, right. Now, I think part of it though too is they hit a difficult spot. They hit a ceiling, like I said
Mhm.
earlier, and then now they interpret this as a great difficulty, and now they gotta maybe they think about quitting, right?
Mhm.
How do people reframe those things to really see it more as an opportunity? Like, how do they do that?
Well, you you just gave away the punchline. You asked that exact question. How do you, or what would it take to make this difficulty the best opportunity that you've ever had? And
Yeah.
I like to put that emphasis on it. Not just like, oh, a good opportunity. What would it take? Like, okay, let's say you lost your job. What would you need to learn? Or what skills would you need to have? Or what opportunities would need to present themselves to make you, looking back on this in 1 year, say that that was the single best thing that's ever happened to you? And then from there, you can build up an interesting repertoire of different actions or views, perspectives that you can take to move forward toward that actual goal. Because very often, I mean, as you know, it's like that quote unquote difficult thing is the thing that's going to propel you forward.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so we talked a little bit, I think, a couple months ago about the Rockefeller deal. I think at the time we're still working on it. We had some real hard, tough problems with that deal. Not only we're trying to take it down during COVID, it's a very big deal. Lenders were drying up everywhere. It was a
Mhm.
very, very tough deal, and we pulled it off. We didn't know at the time. I only found out recently that over the past 25 years, 100 different parties have tried to buy this asset. 100 different people. Like, these people were well-heeled people. They had the money for
Yeah.
whatever reason or another. They could not pull it off. I mean, I gotta wonder, man. I mean, if I would have known that, would I have gone into the deal? Right?
Right.
It's like if you knew how hard it was, like for these guys that had the money and had everything else, and it was tough. It was tough.
Yeah.
But I mean, coming out of it though has created a whole bunch of new opportunities that are now coming about that would never have access to. Deals coming out of the woodwork now,
Yeah.
right? It's insane. It's crazy, but it's
Exactly.
overcoming those limitations, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I hear that, I hear a few different things. One, you overcame the limitations, and now your success is breeding further success. Right, the deals come out of the woodwork, so you've reached a new plateau, a new level. Um, I mean, my guess is that in the struggle, you probably learned something about yourself, about the industry in general, about financing, that is incredibly valuable moving forward. Right, that's probably going to change or transform the way that you think about future large deals. I see you nodding your head, so that must be
Yeah,
we're on to
yeah.
something. So this that little piece of knowledge, I mean, that is the thing. That's the golden key for you for
Yeah.
moving forward.
Oh yeah, I mean, I knew that this business, the real estate business, is a tough business to begin with,
Mhm.
and it requires a high level of commitment. And until you do a deal like that, you realize that the commitment level, that even I thought was needed, is nothing compared to what in reality you really need to be successful. Not only the the ability to execute, but the fortitude to make it over all of these tough situations,
Right,
right?
right.
That's the tough part, and yeah, it's helped me out tremendously. It's like I'm ready to do the next one. Actually, we're already looking at another redevelopment deal, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Yeah, it's like, well, I mean, Grant Cardone in your industry, he talks about this, the
Yeah,
10x, the thing, everything changes at the 10x level, and that you're going to need 10x. Well, you should at least plan for or consider that you need to 10x your effort moving forward. And I find that to be true. I don't, what I, so I sometimes have clients that are very into that, the 10x, and I agree with it. I also think you have to be careful to really be putting your effort and your kind of mental energy toward the things that actually matter. And so sometimes I'll have clients that I call, the work harder martyr, and they just they want to overperform all the time to everyone, very often in the C-suite. And what ends up happening is they burn out really quickly, and so it's hard for them to take a step back and to realize that actually what you're doing is hard work, but the real hard work, the authentic hard work, is being able to identify what's worth doing and what's worth letting go. And that's
yeah,
that's the primary question. That's where coaching can really help people.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. I think part of it too is also getting some clarity, and really getting rid of all the useless ideas, getting rid of the shiny object syndrome,
Right.
right? And really attacking those things that they really should be focused on. I think that I find whenever I'm doing coaching of multifamily stuff anyway,
Hmm.
that's one of the biggest problems, that the shiny object syndrome. Everybody's chasing down all these, and they have these crazy ideas that have never been done before because they're just too wacky.
Right.
And that's me being nice about it right now. But yeah, I mean, how, I guess, what are your general thoughts around that? Like, how do you help people overcome that shiny object syndrome? Like, do you do anything special to help them out with that?
Yeah, when you have the shiny object syndrome, it's really important as a coach to be able to ask very concrete questions. So that's when you shift from kind of some of the mindset work, the visualization work, and go to the real rubber meets the road type of work. I'm thinking about a client who he's basically he's an executive coach, had a great platform, he was a great coach, and ended up not being able to pay his bills. And so he called me up and we started working together. And when I was talking to him, his initial thoughts were, I'm going to fix up my website. I'm going to work on this funnel. I'm going to do all these, I'm going to do paid ads, all these things. And it's like, none of that stuff had worked for him so far. And I said, no, absolutely not. As your coach, I forbid you to do any of that for the next 30 days. I want you to do the opposite of that and get on the phone with 50 people. And I want you to actually sell your coaching package. And sure enough, within 30 days, he had, I think like tripled his income, his gross income. And that allowed him then to be able to do some of the more fancy things with the funnels and the ads and rework his website and all of that. So it's a long-winded way of saying the rubber meets the road for him was, let's sell something. Let's sell a coaching package. Let's make some actual money, see if that works, and then throw money behind that before you try to overcomplicate and layer things on.
Hmm. I mean, it almost sounds like he's got something I mentioned earlier, that addiction to urgency, right? He thinks that's
Yeah.
the only way. Gotta go, run towards that thing, And it
Yeah.
sounds to me like that's not actually the answer.
No, usually not. Usually not. I mean, you do have to put in the work. You have to put in the effort. You have to be willing to really struggle. But at the same time, it's almost like a mental security blanket if you think that everything is urgent all the time and you run around like a chicken with its head cut off. You have the shiny object syndrome, and then you end up getting nothing done. There's another great book, actually, Essentialism. I don't know if we talked about that. Greg McKeown, wonderful book. And he essentially uses energy. Well, I'll try to think about it. I'm not sure if this is in the book or if I saw it somewhere else, but it's like a light bulb. The energy that it takes to power a light bulb is, if you can harness that and align it in the way that a laser does, it can reach the moon versus just lighting one single room. And so it's that alignment, that focus on what really matters can get you very far. If not, it just becomes this fuzzy thing and you end up burning out.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's power of focus, right?
Exactly.
I mean, ultimately that's what really, that's what I had to do, honestly, when I really quit IT and decided to
Hmm.
make real estate my thing, but more importantly, multifamily at the time.
Hmm.
Now we're doing other things besides multifamily, but the only reason why I'm doing that is because I have a good team in place that's handling the multifamily business.
Hmm.
They got it down. We have processes in place, so it's easy for me to take on
Hmm.
these other two other lines of business. But to your point, it's getting that clarity, getting that to really prepare that person to really increase their productivity and grow. And I
Right.
think that's what really coaching comes down to, right? Is helping get
Yeah.
that clarity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what you just said, so interesting. You said I have the right teams in place to take over what I had been doing. So you essentially like worked yourself out of a job, which is exactly what I try to coach leaders and entrepreneurs to do. Work yourself to a point where the team can it becomes its own animal, it lives on its own. So then you can either focus on driving the strategic direction of the business or take on other lines. Because as you know, a lot at that level, it becomes pattern recognition, right? You start to see like, oh, I cracked the code on this pattern. I think I can do the same thing over here. It's an adjacent industry, an adjacent asset class, whatever it is. And then you can dive in deep to that. And soon enough, I mean, your goal isn't to be working 12 hours a day for the rest of your life. Soon enough, the team will continue to build on its own, right? And then so you can walk away, go for a vacation in the Himalayas for 2 years and come back a much wealthier man.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
That's why I love real estate, because that's one of the few places you can actually do that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But I think one of the things that I'm working on is is really my patience level when it comes to really building those teams or building the business, is
Mhm.
that it doesn't seem to be fast enough. That's
Mhm.
even for me. We just closed 300 units last week. I'm already trying to find my next one. I have a personal goal of 500 units, at least get under contract by the end of the year.
Mhm.
And we're in October right now. So certainly it's going to be tough to find that number of units in the market today, but it's one of those things about practicing that patience, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is practicing patience. I mean, there's English is an interesting language because in patience in English has the flavor, at least when many people think of it, of like waiting, right? Like I'm gonna wait. That's like it's like almost like a passive patience. But in other languages like Sanskrit and Tibetan in particular, it has much more of an active um, feeling to it. It's almost like perseverance or tolerance, but tolerance is kind of has a wacky English meaning too. So it's about being able to deal with a frustration without getting overly frustrated. And so that's kind of the essence of patience, similar to what you're talking to. And I mean, it's a fine balance between resting on your laurels, feeling happy with where you are, but also being willing to push the envelope and increase the situation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think that in my own personal case, I can tell you that, yeah, I've never been a very patient person, but there's times when I have to really, really try hard to practice personal patience, either working with buyers of deals, for instance,
Sure.
or trying to grow the business. It's because I'm trying to grow this thing as quickly as I can and as responsibly as I can, but it never seems to be fast enough, right? It
Yeah.
never seems to be
Yeah.
fast enough. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I like to talk to my clients about when it comes to patience or frustration, um, I try to have them think about it as going to the gym, right? So the frustration level that you're feeling, it's similar to the burn that you feel when you go to the gym. And so you don't get it's one thing to feel the burn, be like, oh, I wish this were going faster. But it's another thing entirely to be angry at the weights for causing the burn, right? That would be silly. If we went to the gym and we're like, oh, I'm so pissed off at these weights for making me feel the burn, it's not their fault. It's like that is the thing that's actually growing the muscle. So from your perspective, those frustrations that are causing you patience are actually building the muscles of success that you need to proceed down your journey.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is that as I personally go through this journey that I'm working on
Mhm.
and getting into bigger and bigger deals, there's a greater level of complexity that does require a lot more patience than doing the small ones. And as I'm trying to unload my smaller deals, not because there's anything wrong with them, but it's more like I really need to focus on larger deals. And we're also shifting our business to a different asset class.
Mhm.
Some of the smaller buyers, they just have a very different way of approaching business and they're still learning, right?
Right.
So that introduces a whole different type of patience
Right.
when you're doing that kind of stuff. But hopefully they'll take on some coaching that might help them out. Right?
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely. No
I don't
better
know.
way to accelerate your career path than
Right, right,
coaching.
right.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that's for certain, though, and we talked about this before too, is that as you start excelling and start really growing I guess not only growing your business as an entrepreneur, but also rising through the ranks as a C-level executive, it really becomes that much more important to really reshift your thinking and refocus what you're doing, because at any given moment, if you're not on top of your game, you can easily get a smackdown and you're done. You're either fired or you get into a wrong deal and now you're cleaned out for half your fortune. I mean, that can happen without the right mindset, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, as the stakes get higher, it's the potential for failure, catastrophic failure, is also higher. Which I mean, obviously, I just talked about reframing difficulty and all of that. I don't believe there's no end point. So at the failure point, that then could be a further teaching opportunity or learning opportunity. But I do think as people climb up the ladder, as you become the C level or managing a higher level portfolio, whatever it is. Um, the job of the person at that level is not only to help regulate their own perspective, but to be able to do this for other people. And so that's where
Yeah.
I think leaders oftentimes there's a gap there because we don't many people can do this on their own to some degree, but it's much harder or a different set of skills to be able to help other people do it. And what you find is the best leaders can help both direct and dismantle the stories of employees or partners or investors, or, even outward facing, the perception of the media perception, things like that. And so it's important to be able to step into that hat. I think of it as almost like a shaman of perspectives, right? To be able to kind of craft this perspective that's going to align the strategic values of the company with your own strategic alignment, and then create success.
Right. And I think it's also worth noting too, is that for many of your clients, I mean, there's guys that I knew too that work at the C level, they have someone on board, so to speak, as part of the team that they actually rely on as coaches, right? To help them make the right decisions to run their business.
Yeah, that is true. So usually I would say the top people tend to have outside coaches that are contracted outside, just because if you have somebody that's an employee, if they're within the company, they tend to, it's very hard not to fall into pleasing the boss. And so as
Yeah.
a coach, you have to be willing to call out BS on things and have just absolutely no fear when it comes to calling out patterns. So I've worked for fairly large corporations where they had their own learning and development kind of team and group that would deal with all the mid-level and even some of the senior executives. And then they brought me me and a couple other people to do the highest level, just because they needed that outside source. So it's important. And I will say this, every coach that I know that's worth, their salt has an outside coach. I have my own coach. It's very difficult to hold up a mirror for yourself, and it's much easier to have somebody else do it from the outside.
Yeah. Well, I think, do you find then that the reason why people don't take on coaching, is it a financial thing? Like, is it because they don't know? Like, why do you think it is? I mean,
Yeah.
I do a different type of coaching in that I'm doing real estate coaching. I'm helping people. I'm introducing them to the right brokers, to the right
Mhm.
lenders, and all that stuff, and really helping them connect the dots to become successful. You're doing a different type of coaching. Your coaching actually is even deeper in that, which is, in my opinion, far more important, because they have to get the mindset down. But I mean, why aren't people really getting around this more often?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a really good question, and one that I think a lot of coaches will ask themselves. The first, I think that maybe their dream isn't big enough. Like sometimes I'll meet people and, I'll tell them, I'll say, look, I'm not a great fit for you. I could take your money, but at the end of the day, it's not, I'm looking for somebody that is going to look back on my services in a year from now or 2 years from now and say, look, I would have paid Nick 10 times the amount of money for that. Like, you got to have a big enough dream to make it worthwhile.
Right.
And so some people are just looking for, maybe more therapy, maybe to feel a little bit better about themselves, something like that. Like, just read a self-help book, get a therapist, that kind of stuff. So that's the first thing. The second thing is they don't believe in the power of it because they've never experienced it. And so they think
Mm.
like, well, what is this guy going to show me? How does this actually work? So that you do run across that. And then I would say the third reason, for me, most of the people that I talk to that don't sign on, it's actually this one. And they're afraid of the growth. They know, they have a sense in talking to me after, 45 minutes, an hour, like we could do great things. There's a great click there, a great connection, and they have some faith in the power of coaching, but at the end of the day, they're not ready for it. And so it's just another glass ceiling for them. And so they intentionally, or sometimes it's subconsciously, choose to not be ready for it. And I would say that's a lot like I said, for me, that's probably 80% of the time. If somebody chooses not to work with me after being on the phone call, it's like, they're just not ready to do it yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's someone that's actually had coaches in the past. I can tell you that, well, I have to tell you, you already know, but for whoever's listening, is that it's helped me out tremendously. But I think a big part of it, though, is finding the right one, finding the right chemistry,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Big
big part
time,
of it.
big time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tell people, sometimes I'll have people that are interviewing, 2 or 3 or up to 5 coaches, and I always say, look, don't, and they'll ask me like, how's your methodology different? How's your background different? What are your credentials and all of that? And I go through that and we talk about it. But at the end of the day, I say, look, you have to go on the person that you want to be calling every week or every other week and talk to for an hour, and that you can trust to be able to call out BS, be able to point out your patterns, and that you want to have some confidence in moving forward. And if you don't have that, it's complete crap, right? You could be the best coach in the world. If it's a wrong fit, you're not going to get the same. You're much better off going for like the lowest level coach that you have a connection with, than somebody that is highfalutin that you don't. And the same thing for coaches, actually. So like once you get pretty established, you get pretty good at identifying those people that you don't really want to work with, or that you just don't think that you can serve well enough. It doesn't mean that they're not ready for coaching. So I have a couple of guys that I refer people out to. If it's somebody that if it's like, oh, you sound like a great person, I don't think I'm your guy, let me refer you out to this guy, and they end up being very happy.
Do you think it's because maybe they're, say, for instance, looking for a real estate person? You happen to have real estate background, so you might be able to help that person, but maybe they come from automotive industry. I don't know, and you don't have any automotive experience. Is it something like that? Is it more technical like that perspective, or is it usually something else?
No, it's usually something else. So it's usually so that would be like industry specific knowledge, right? And so sometimes
Right.
I will occasionally field those calls if they're like, hey, look, I need somebody to help me with digital marketing. Can you do digital marketing coach? Like I may know something about digital marketing, but I'll tell them right away, like, look, you actually don't need a coach. You need a consultant for that specific industry vertical, right? Like I'm not going to teach you. I'm not going to say, here's how you line up your web page. Here's how you do this. Like it's much deeper than that. So that's the one aspect, but it's more about personality and fit. I'll just give you an example. I had somebody that called me. She was setting up a startup, which I have some experience with, and her idea was great. She was a go-getter, but just like there was something, I hate to be too California with you, but like a little bit energetic that was off about it. And I just thought, I'm probably not the guy for you. Let me pass you off to my good friend. And I did, and they ended up coaching for 6 months, and she's done great things. So it wasn't that I couldn't help her. It's just there wasn't a click there. And so as a
Yeah.
coach with integrity, you have to be willing to say, look, I'm going to say no to that 15 grand or whatever it is. Because I know that there's somebody better for you.
Yeah, and I think, and that's their next speaks volumes, because for many coaches that are out there, they will take the 15 grand.
Yeah, they will.
You
I
know,
know. It's too bad. I totally get that. A lot of coaches really struggle for clients, right? And so it's it's always in the back of my mind to set up like a coaching for coaches type thing. But there are so many good people out there doing it, that I don't want to really waste the time putting it in. But at the end of the day, you have to be able to say no to those people. And what I tell my colleagues is there's always somebody else that will follow them. Always. And usually it's a better fit. You feel more successful, and that success creates success. But a lot of coaches get stuck in this scarcity mentality, even though, we're all trained not to do that, but we just do it. And it's unfortunate. It doesn't do anybody a good service.
yeah, yeah, and I think that the way that you handle it, and we've spent some time together as well. And I got your book as well. It's an excellent book for anybody
Oh, thank you.
listening. Definitely check it out. The way your approach is certainly very different. It is a lot more authentic than for some of the other coaches out there that I've personally spoken to. Nothing wrong with them. They're great. They're great people. But yeah, it's a scarcity mindset that creeps in.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want is to have a scarcity person teaching you how to be abundant.
Yeah. Exactly.
That
That's
doesn't sound
exactly.
very, doesn't sound very healthy, right? It sounds really
Yeah.
bad.
No, it doesn't really work. There are great coaches out there that do that. And I like to call it, I shouldn't be as pejorative about it, but I sometimes will say like they're great binder coaches. They went through some training, and maybe they spent a lot of money, thousands of dollars doing the training. They're really good, but they're working off a binder, right? They're like, okay, first it's going to be here, then it's this, then it's that. And, that's fine, I think, and I think it's really good for a lot of people. But I'm very old school in that way. Like I'm only going to coach you around the things that you actually need, right? Even though I could coach somebody totally different. Like I have a client who I teach zero mindfulness kind of visualization stuff. It's all about kind of structure and different elements with her. But in other clients, it's all about visualization and mindset. So it just depends on the person. Like what are you trying to achieve, and where are the gaps in your understanding?
Hmm. Wow. I mean, so there's so much that goes into putting together a coaching business, but more importantly, so much that goes into really finding that person and helping them out in a way that that really helps them become successful. But for that person that's listening right now, what sort of bulletproof advice would you have for them if they're listening? Like maybe they're contemplating what to do with their life. Maybe they're lost. What would you say to them?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's advice as much as a saying that I live by and that my family has actually lived by for a long time. And it's comes from Virgil, actually, the poet Virgil. And so it's in Latin, it's kind of dog Latin, but it's audaci favet fortuna, which means fortune favors the bold. And if I look back at my life and almost everyone that I coach, I'll just say everyone that I coach, if you think about what is the next bold move to make, it's always the right thing to do. So what I would encourage people is to think about that. Like, what does it mean to be bold in my life? And where can I choose to take bold action and take courageous action? And there is where you're going to find both your own growth and the financial and kind of worldly rewards that you're looking for.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I apply that rule to my life, and it's amazing. It's amazing since I've done it. So that's
absolutely.
very, very good advice.
You had to. You're doing it right now. I mean, you just closed the deal. You did it, and now you're looking to do the next thing. You're looking to. Yeah, fortune favors the bold. Exactly.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. I got goosebumps just thinking about it, man. It's awesome.
That's great. That's great. I love it.
All right, guys, if you want to reach out to Nick, reach him through his website at nickeganphd.com. I hope you got some insight on how to encourage your personal and organizational growth to build a better life. You can see that it's going to be crucial to your success. All right. So definitely look into Nick's programs, look into his book, check it out. It's really good stuff. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast.